name is Rachel, I'm 38, and I never thought I could feel this kind of love. But then he came into my life, and everything changed. The campus was quiet in the early morning, the kind of quiet that belonged only to old universities. Stone buildings stood with patient dignity, wrapped in ivy that had learned the shape of centuries. Rachel walked across the main quad alone, her heels echoing softly against the worn path. She liked arriving before everyone else. It reminded her that authority did not need noise to exist. At 38, Rachel was one of the youngest deans the university had ever appointed. Her office overlooked the central lawn where students would soon gather with books and coffee and unfinished dreams. From her window, she could see the lecture halls where knowledge was treated like something sacred. This place believed in discipline, intellect, and restraint. So did she. Her day was already full: committee meetings, funding reviews, faculty evaluations, but her attention paused when she saw Professor Allen's name on the schedule. He was giving a guest lecture that afternoon. Allen was not an ordinary professor. He carried the kind of reputation that did not need to be announced. Nobel-level mind, the faculty whispered. A thinker whose words appeared in journals the way monuments appeared in cities, solid, permanent, impossible to ignore. Students filled halls just to hear him speak, even when they did not understand half of what he said. Rachel had met him only a few times before, always briefly, always formally. Polite nods in hallways, careful conversations at faculty dinners. He had a quiet presence, the kind that did not compete for attention. It simply waited until attention arrived. That morning, she received an email from his department requesting a small accommodation. Alan's wife, Dr. Susan, was unwell. Very unwell. He might need flexibility with his schedule. Rachel read the message twice. She knew Susan by name, only an accomplished academic in her own right, spoken of with respect and admiration. The illness had not been discussed openly. This place did not like vulnerability. It preferred excellence. She replied with a short, respectful message offering support. Professional. Appropriate. Still, when the lecture time came, Rachel chose to attend in person. The hall was nearly full. The air carried that familiar mix of anticipation and reverence. Rachel sat near the back, hands folded in her lap, posture composed. She watched Alan step onto the stage. He looked thinner than she remembered. His voice, however, was steady, calm, measured. He spoke about ethics, responsibility, and the limits of knowledge. Not once did his tone falter. If he was carrying pain, it stayed hidden behind years of discipline. Rachel listened carefully, not as a dean, but as a human being. Something about the way he spoke felt heavier than usual, as if every sentence carried a second meaning underneath it. After the lecture, applause filled the room. Alan nodded once, gathered his papers, and left the stage. Rachel waited until most people had gone before approaching him. She told herself it was professional courtesy. Nothing more. Professor Allen, she said gently. He turned, offering a small, tired smile. Dean Rachel. They spoke briefly about the lecture, about scheduling, about things that felt safe. When she mentioned Susan, his eyes softened in a way that startled her. She's resting today, he said. Good days and bad days. I'm sorry, Rachel replied, and for once the words felt insufficient. From that day on, their interactions became more frequent, though never planned. She would see him walking slowly across campus, phone pressed to his ear. Sometimes she would ask if he needed anything. Sometimes he would simply say, "No, thank you." Their conversations stayed within careful boundaries: books, ideas, students, the strange responsibility of shaping minds while trying to understand your own. Rachel noticed things she told herself not to notice. The way Alan paused before answering certain questions. The way his hands trembled slightly when he thought no one was watching. The way he carried a worn lecture folder everywhere, held close like something fragile. She also noticed the change in herself. She began looking for him without meaning to, listening more closely when he spoke, feeling a strange tension when he smiled at her, a warmth she immediately pushed away. This is wrong, she told herself. Love, attachment, emotional closeness, these things complicated judgment. As a dean, as a woman in power, she had learned to keep her inner world sealed. Feelings blurred lines, and blurred lines destroyed lives, especially his. Alan loved his wife, that much was undeniable. Rachel saw it in the careful way he spoke of Susan, in the way he always left early, in the way his entire world seemed oriented around someone who was no longer visible. And yet, slowly, quietly, something else was forming in the spaces between conversations. A friendship. It grew in small moments, shared silences in empty corridors, long discussions about philosophy that drifted into personal reflections before either of them realized it. A sense of being understood, without explanation. Rachel hated herself for it. At night, alone in her apartment, she replayed their conversations and felt the weight of guilt settle into her chest. She told herself she was imagining things, that respect was not attraction, that concern was not affection. Love is wrong here, she thought. Love is a betrayal. So she did what she had always done when emotions threatened control. She pulled back. She shortened conversations. She delegated meetings. She avoided the paths she knew he walked. When Alan noticed, and he did not ask why. The distance hurt more than she expected, and that frightened her most of all. The distance Rachel created did not bring relief. It only sharpened everything she was trying not to feel. The campus remained the same ivy-climbing stone walls, bells marking time, but something inside her had shifted. Silence, once her refuge, now felt heavy. Every avoided hallway, every cancelled meeting carried a quiet ache she refused to name. Alan noticed the change more clearly than she expected. He had always been observant, trained by years of reading between lines. When she stopped lingering after conversations, when her emails became shorter, more formal, he felt it as a loss he did not know how to confront. Still, he respected the boundary she seemed to draw. He had no right to demand closeness. Not now. Not ever. Susan's condition worsened as winter approached. Alan spoke of it rarely, but when he did, his voice carried exhaustion rather than fear. Rachel saw him one evening outside the medical building, sitting alone on a bench, the familiar lecture folder resting on his knees. She almost walked past him. Almost. But something in his posture collapsed, unguarded, stopped her. They spoke that night longer than they had in weeks. About illness, about helplessness, about how knowledge offered no protection against loss. Rachel listened, truly listened, and for a moment forgot all her rules. She placed her hand briefly over his, a small instinctive gesture. The contact lasted only a second, but it felt like a line crossed. She withdrew immediately, apologized, stood up too quickly. Alan said nothing, but his eyes reflected something close to pain, not desire, not accusation, just understanding mixed with sorrow. That night, Rachel lay awake, guilt pressing down on her chest. She told herself she was becoming someone she did not recognize, a woman who allowed herself to feel when she should have remained composed, a woman who was drawn to a man whose life was already breaking. "This is not love," she insisted. "This is weakness." The following weeks passed in restrained politeness. Susan was moved into home care. Alan stopped teaching for a while. The lecture folder, however, never left his side. Rachel noticed it once when he came to submit paperwork, his hands resting protectively over it, as if it contained something irreplaceable. One evening, Alan asked if they could talk. Not about work, just talk, Rachel agreed, against her better judgment. They met in her office after sunset, the campus outside wrapped in dusk. He spoke first. He spoke carefully. He admitted that her presence had become a source of comfort during a time when comfort felt forbidden. He said he was ashamed of needing anyone beyond his wife. He said he did not know what he felt, only that it frightened him. Rachel felt her control crack. She told him love was wrong, that even thinking about it felt like betrayal, that she blamed herself for every quiet moment of closeness, every shared smile. She told him she believed feelings were choices, and she had chosen poorly. Her voice broke when she said she could not be part of this, not in any form. Alan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded once. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. He simply said he understood, that perhaps distance was the only honest response. They parted that night with a formality that felt like mourning. Days turned into weeks. Susan passed away quietly without public announcement. The university lowered its flags. Rachel sent condolences but did not attend the service. She told herself it was respect. In truth, it was fear. Alan returned to campus months later, older somehow, though his posture remained composed. He resumed teaching. Rachel avoided him completely now. The separation was complete, deliberate, and unbearably painful. Neither of them spoke of what had almost existed, and the tension remained, unresolved, waiting. Spring returned to the campus without asking permission. Ivy thickened along the stone walls, and the air softened in a way that made memories surface uninvited. Rachel noticed the change from her office window. The way students sat closer together on the lawn, the way laughter lingered longer than it had in winter. She told herself seasons were neutral things. They did not carry meaning. People did. She had not seen Alan properly since Susan's death. Not really. Only glimpses from a distance. A silhouette crossing the quad. A quiet figure entering a lecture hall. Each time something tightened in her chest, followed by the familiar voice inside her reminding her that pain was the cost of doing the right thing. One afternoon, an envelope appeared on her desk. No return address, cream-coloured paper, her name written in careful handwriting. Rachel stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a short note from Alan. He was teaching one final lecture that evening, not a public event. A small room. He asked if she would attend. No pressure, no expectation. Her first instinct was to refuse. Distance had become her armor. But something in the simplicity of the request unsettled her. This felt like an ending, or a beginning. She could not tell which frightened her more. The lecture room was nearly empty when she arrived. Only a handful of faculty members sat scattered across the seats. Alan stood at the front, thinner still but steadier. The lecture folder lay on the desk before him. Rachel recognized it instantly. He began speaking without introduction. This lecture was different, not theoretical, not abstract. He spoke about love not as romance, but as responsibility, as care, as endurance. He spoke about the way love demands presence, even when nothing can be fixed. Rachel felt every word land inside her with quiet force. As he spoke, she realized something she had been avoiding for months. This was not about guilt anymore. This was about truth. When the lecture ended, there was no applause, only silence. Alan closed the folder slowly and looked up. His eyes met Rachel's, and for the first time in a long while, he did not look away. After the room emptied, she remained seated. Her hands were cold. Her heart was loud. Alan approached her carefully, as if giving her space to leave. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I almost didn't," Rachel replied. "I know." They stood there, surrounded by empty chairs and the fading echo of words. Rachel felt the weight of everything she had never said pressing against her chest. "I was wrong," she said suddenly. The words surprised even her. "About love, about control, about what I thought was moral." Alan said nothing. He waited. He had learned how. "I thought distance would protect everyone," she continued. "Instead, it just made the truth louder." She looked at the lecture folder. "You never let go of that." He followed her gaze. His expression softened. "Susan asked me not to." Her breath caught. He opened the folder slowly, deliberately, and removed a single envelope. The paper was worn at the edges, handled many times. He held it for a moment before offering it to her. "She told me to open it only when I taught about love again," he said quietly. "And only if you were there." Rachel felt her knees weaken. "Me?" Alan nodded. "She knew more than I wanted to admit." With trembling hands, Rachel opened the letter. Susan's words were gentle, direct, alive. She wrote about knowing she was dying long before anyone said it aloud, about watching her husband carry the weight of devotion without complaint, about seeing Rachel not as a threat, but as a presence of warmth during a cold time. "I do not fear losing love," the letter said. "I fear love being buried with me." Susan wrote that love is not a possession, that it does not vanish when one body fails, that it changes shape, finds new expressions, and asks to be honored rather than denied. "You did not take anything from me," the letter continued. "What you feel was never stolen. It was given." Rachel's vision blurred. She pressed the letter to her chest as the walls she had built finally collapsed. Tears came without restraint, deep and shaking. all the guilt she had carried broke apart in that moment, leaving exhaustion behind. Alan watched her quietly. He did not reach for her. He did not interrupt the release. He simply remained present. When the tears slowed, something else emerged beneath them. Calm, not happiness, not certainty, just peace. I ran away, Rachel whispered, because I was afraid of becoming someone who felt. Alan's voice was steady. And now... She looked at him fully. Now I understand that love did not end. It transformed. He exhaled slowly, as if setting something down he had carried for too long. They walked out of the lecture hall together. The campus was bathed in evening light, golden and forgiving. Without thinking, Rachel reached for his hand. He hesitated only a moment before taking it. They did not speak. They walked side by side, not toward answers, not toward promises, but towards something quieter and more honest. And for the first time, that was enough. Love does not end. It transforms. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe to our channel.